Yo, to the Shifty crew. What is good with y'all today? It's your boy B with the Shifts. Today we got the most haunted places in the world. Go follow my Twitch, twitch.tv/Be with the Shifts. We're live every day at 8 p.m. CT. Let's get straight to it. Shout out, trust me, bro.
Around the world.
You've
I've touched
reacted
on a lot of
multiple times
creepy
on the
things
channel
so far
before.
on this channel.
Shout out to
Serial
him.
killers, mythical
Serial
creatures,
killers,
folklore,
mythical creatures.
SCPs, but I've never discussed
Whoa.
ghosts directly. But today,
Okay.
that changes. And I'm going to answer all your questions about these haunted locations. Like, how did it become haunted? What ghostly encounters have been recorded? And are these
It's like the
places
poop there.
even
Why would I
really
want
haunted?
to poop somewhere
The year
haunted?
is 1835.
Why would I want to
You
do
have
that?
just been invited to a beautiful Christmas get-together at one of your friends' manors in the English countryside. The manor was just absolutely beautiful, and this party was packed with notable people, respected colonels, wealthy businessmen, and high-ranking government officials. The night consisted of
Bro,
seemingly
what type
endless
of- how do you know
food,
this?
drinks, and music, and
This is
everything
1834.
was just so
How do you know
perfect. Late into the night, once the party started to
Okay.
die down, you and a group of friends decided that it was time to go to bed, and you all went your own separate ways to get to your
Yeah, I
bedrooms.
cannot sleep
You
in
turned down a
something that
hallway
looks
and
like
you're
that,
finally
man.
by yourself and only steps away from your bedroom. When you
Somebody's gonna
notice
come
down
behind
the
and
hallway,
watch.
There's this woman.
Yep.
A woman that
Knew
was
it.
wearing only brown clothing. You didn't recognize this
Yep.
woman from the party.
I'm out of
This
there
isn't your house.
immediately, man.
You didn't know everybody at this
Immediately.
party, so
Out
you
of there.
figured it was somebody else also going to their room. This woman was slightly notable due to the apparel that she was wearing,
Like,
but it was
wait, why
nothing
would
out of
you
the
expect
ordinary,
that?
and you continued to your room and had a
Obviously,
good night's rest. You woke up the following
no
morning on
survival
Christmas
skills,
Eve and
man.
engaged
Christmas
in the morning
Eve horror
festivities. The
stories.
party was still not
The
done.
Nightmare
There was a
Before
huge
Christmas
brunch
ass.
being served, and you and everybody else were not going to
Brunch.
miss it. You sit down at a table with some of your friends, one of which being a colonel, and he mentions that last night he saw a rather peculiar woman. Another person at your table asks, what did she look like? And the colonel goes on to explain that on his way to his bedroom, he saw a woman dressed exclusively
Yo.
in brown robes.
Oh my-
These
okay.
robes were dated and
Wow.
tattered and had to have been at least from the previous century. It didn't look right at
Wow.
all. And the colonel was concerned because this woman might have been somebody who either snuck into the manor or was somebody who was
Yep.
obviously lost. But the colonel mentioned once he spotted this woman and walked closer to her and then tried approaching her, he realized this woman had turned around
Wow.
and he got a look at her face. And that's when he claimed that he saw this woman's bright white face with empty eye sockets.
Wow.
And the man was terrified. He didn't scream or run away, but he quickly made his way to his room without asking any more questions.
Good survival
Instantly, your heart
skills, but
dropped
I
to your
would have been
stomach
out of there,
because
man.
You also saw the same
Hey.
woman, but you didn't see her face.
Wow.
And before you could say
Okay.
anything, another woman at the table says, I also
Wow.
saw a lady dressed up in brown. I didn't see her face,
Wow.
but she was standing in the hallway, not saying anything and not moving. And your heart and stomach only sank deeper. You noticed that the host of the party was sitting beside you, and her face was in shock. You asked her, who is this lady wearing these brown rags? And she confessed that she had absolutely no idea. The
Dang.
Christmas party
How
was
do
a
you
formal
confess
event, and
that?
everybody was dressed in
Like,
their
confession
absolute
is like
best.
something
Nobody
you
was
know.
wearing brown,
Like, just
and there was
admit you don't know
nobody in the
anything.
party with sunken in, missing eyeballs. The host of this party quickly stands up on her chair and started clinking a spoon on her glass, causing the conversation in the room to a silence. And the host of the party asked, did anybody see a woman in
Wow.
brown robes anywhere in the manor last night? And to her dismay, numerous people in this room of nearly 100
What?
people raised their hand. The story
Is she
I
not
just
paying
told is
attention,
based
man?
on a real documented encounter
Okay.
that happened in 1835 at a Christmas party.
Man, who knows if somebody was just bored one day in the past 20 years and then got one of those feathers, put some ink on the end of it, and just started writing, man. History is so fake, I feel like that. There is no way, man. There is no way you got the exact interaction. This is like a Romeo and Juliet story. This is something Shakespeare would write, yo. It's not good, but like, bro, this shit is not true.
And this story is significant because it is the first recorded sighting of the ghost that is now known as the Brown Lady
The
at the
Brown
iconic
Lady.
Raynham Hall.
Wow,
and this
okay.
isn't the only sighting
Wow.
that's taken place, and it's probably not even the most iconic either. And only days after this event, when the host of the party made the staff aware of all of these claims, people literally quit their jobs
Okay.
and never returned out of fear
How
of
do you see a
encountering
ghost?
this strange apparition. But
Like,
that's
you're
not
not
it. There was a
supposed to see a
handful of sightings
ghost.
on that
Like,
night
what?
in 1835.
Wow.
But the following year, in
Okay.
1836, Captain Franklin
Wow.
Marryat, who is actually a friend of Charles Dickens, heard tell
Who?
of the legend of this brown lady in the Raynham Manor and spoke
Yeah,
to the owner
okay.
directly and requested that he stay in the
Wow.
most haunted room of them all, so he could prove that there was no ghost at all, and that this legend just
Stupid.
simply came to be because the
Stupid.
owner of this manor wanted to keep people
Stupid.
away from his property. And let's just say
Stupidity,
he
man.
got more than he bargained for. This captain checked into the hotel and stayed in a room that literally had a painting of the apparition hung in the room. Like I mentioned, at this point, the brown lady was already a local legend legend and a common
Wow,
sighting within
man.
the hotel. And for the first 2 nights of his visit, the captain had a normal experience. He was
Wow.
staying in a hotel and rather comically was sleeping with a loaded revolver under his pillow just in case.
He
And it was
ain't
after
using
the
that on a
second night
ghost.
and the beginning of the third night when
Okay.
everything began to change.
Wow.
Because on night 3, Frederick didn't get a good
Wow.
night's sleep at all. What he did get was a run-in with the brown lady. Frederick had just gotten into bed and was ready to go to sleep when he noticed something in front of his door. The door never opened, but there was obviously a shadow of some sort in front of the door blocking the path. The shadow was moving and
he's
getting
gonna
bigger
get his booty
until Frederick
taken.
realized
Yep.
that this
She's
shadow
right
was
there.
exactly what he was looking for. He quickly looked at the painting on the wall and noticed that this was the brown lady, and she was in his room and she was getting closer to him. Frederick grabs the revolver from under his pillow, points it at the apparition, and screams at the top of his lungs, "Stop! Don't come closer! I'm going to shoot!" But the brown
It's a ghost! Why would you shoot a ghost? You have no survival skills, mister. Oh my goodness. People in the 1800s were stupidity at its finest, man. What an idiot. I hope he dies.
brown lady grew a menacing grin and began to get closer, practically
you're
at the
good.
foot of his bed.
You're
When
good.
Frederick pulled the trigger, shot the revolver into the darkness, and the
You're good.
apparition disappeared. 3 hotel workers came into the room to ask what had just
It
happened.
actually worked?
Frederick
Wow.
left the hotel and never returned.
Wow.
I tried to only tell one story per section, but I figured that
Okay.
story was kind of worth going into detail over. Over the late 1800s and early 1900s, there was a
okay.
plethora of other run-ins with the brown lady, which brings us to Captain Hubert C. Provant, who not only had a run-in with the brown lady, but was able to capture a picture of her, a full-body apparition. And
That's
this photo is
AI,
not only
man.
iconic to the Raynham
That's
Hall,
AI,
but it's
man.
also one of the most iconic photos in all of ghost hunting. This photo was
Who you
taken
gonna
in
call?
1936, and since this photo has been taken, sightings have been few
was
and
taken
far
before
between,
World
although
War
many
II.
people
Wow.
still
That's
believe to this
crazy,
day
man.
that Raynham Hall is haunted. Once again, just a crazy story, but you might be thinking, okay, sure, there's
Wow,
this
man.
ghost there, but who is this lady and how did she get there? And because this section's getting long, let me boil it down. According to the legend of the Brown Lady, the Townsend family, which was the family that owned the Raynham Manor, after numerous run-ins with this apparition, was able to identify her from one of the paintings that was displayed within the manor. The woman was named Dorothy Walpole, who lived from 1686 to 1726, and was the
Wow.
sister of Robert Walpole, who is considered the first ever Prime Minister of
It looks
Great Britain.
like
She was the
Santa
second
Claus,
wife
yo.
of Charles Townsend, one of the original Townsends
Who?
that owned the manor, and this man was well known for having a short temper. Allegedly,
guy's
this man had
ugly,
caught
yo.
Dorothy with
Pause.
another man, a lord, and as punishment, he locked her in her room in the manor, and she was never allowed to leave. She wasn't allowed
Oh
to see
my.
friends, family, or even her own
Wow.
children. She was a prisoner in her own
Wow,
home until
okay.
1926 when she passed away from smallpox. Obviously, that story is
Wow.
upsetting both ways.
That's
because
crazy.
if
Why not
Dorothy
just
did
break
cheat,
out,
then
bro?
that's awful. But Charles had absolutely no right to do any
Why
of
not
that
just
whatsoever.
break
If somebody
out?
cheats on you, you just
Like,
break up with
what?
them. You say, hey, you get out of my manor, we're done. You don't say, hey, I'm going to trap you in this room until you die. To this
Just
day,
break
Raynham Hall
out.
is one of the most iconic haunted locations in all of
bro,
England. But
what?
this is one of the more tame entries on the list, and we're only just getting started.
Break
It's the
out,
mid
man.
1800s, and you are a medical doctor, Dr. Charles Finney. You live in Atchison, Kansas, and you run a successful medical operation out of your home. This home was something your
Kansas,
family recently
okay.
commissioned, and now you were both
Wow.
living in it and making it your place of business, at least for now.
Wow.
And everything was going smoothly
okay.
until one night. You were in bed, exhausted after a long day, with your eyes feeling like they're each 1,000 pounds, just begging to be closed. And as you're on the verge of sleep, about to drift off, you hear a knocking at your door. This was extremely uncommon. You obviously
no,
had
that
appointments
sounded a
in the
little
dead of
too
night,
real,
and you
yeah.
had no idea
Wow,
who
okay.
this could be. Reluctantly, you get out of bed and head to your front door. And when you open the door, you notice a woman standing there, holding her young daughter. This woman is frantic and explains that her daughter is in severe pain, and she can't walk, can't move, and she is in endless, excruciating pain coming from her abdomen. The
Whoa.
doctor's fatigue instantly
okay.
wears off, and he's back in work mode. And he invites
Oh,
the woman
wow,
and the daughter
okay.
in, and quickly takes them to his basement examination room, where he's able to identify the
Basement,
likely
yeah,
source
okay.
of all of this pain, an
Wow.
inflamed appendix that was about to burst. The doctor informed the mother that this young girl needed emergency surgery now, and the mother agreed, saying, please, anything to save my daughter. The doctor quickly prepped the
Wow.
location, washed his hands, grabbed his tools, and then
wow,
began to
okay.
administer the anesthesia. Once everything was
Bro.
ready and the medicine was administered, the doctor hastily made the first incision, although little did he know the anesthesia that he had administered was an improper dose, and this girl who was already in pain was now in even more pain, as she could feel everything. And this
Wow.
incision that the doctor had just made was the final straw. Her body went into shock, and not long after, she passed away on that operating table. That young girl's name was
Wow.
Sally, and this story is the
Sally.
reason why this location is known as the Sally House. First thing I'm going to say
That
right off the
sounds
bat is, as
creepy. I'm
interesting
not
as
gonna
that
lie.
story
Sally
is,
is the
there is
perfect
absolutely
ghost
no
name.
recorded evidence for that story actually being
Okay.
true.
Or
And it's largely
Lucy.
regarded
Like,
as
those
a
type of names
folktale,
are
loosely
scary,
based
I'm
in
not gonna
reality.
lie.
Dr. Charles Finney was a real doctor, and he worked in Atchison, Kansas, and he lived out of his practice that his family had recently
Wow.
commissioned. That all is true. But as far as the story of Sally is concerned, there was no physical evidence. But the reason I mention the story is because it is the story that is most associated with this haunted location. And this haunted location is one of the most iconic in all of the United States of America. So yeah, I
Wow,
wanted to
I've
make that
never heard of
distinction
it.
primarily
That's
because I knew
crazy,
if I
man.
didn't, others would say,
Oh.
that's not actually true. And well, it's not proven
Okay.
either way, but it is highly debated
Wow.
and not proven that it did happen. So I'll let you make up your mind on that. That story is upsetting and
Dang.
sad, but what does it have to do with haunted locations? Well, that story is kind of where everything began. Because after this incident that may or may not have happened in the late 1800s, experiences in the Sally house have been vast and plentiful. Some experiences only consist of hearing a creak or faint footsteps, or even the giggle
Okay.
of a young girl. But other
Wow.
encounters are a lot more sinister, with items being thrown, loud screams
Yeah,
being
that's
heard, and
crazy,
even
man.
visitors being scratched to the point of bleeding. Nearly every
bro,
former tenant or
what?
owner of the Sally house that had been interviewed
They
alleged
die.
to have experienced paranormal activity
Well,
of some sort,
at least they
typically
didn't
with
die.
consistent attributes across all of the accounts, with some even claiming to see Sally in the window at night when it was known that nobody was home. If you're watching this video,
That's
you're
crazy,
probably
man.
into the paranormal, which means you've probably
That's
seen
crazy,
some of your
yo.
favorite ghost YouTubers
Wow.
stay in this house. Sam and Colby,
Oh
Nick and
my,
Ryan,
okay.
Exploring with Josh, or even
never heard of
large-scale
any of
TV
those
productions.
guys, man.
All of these people have stayed in
I'm
the Sally
not
house
gonna
and
lie.
had unique
Wow.
experiences. So for that
Okay.
reason, I'm not going to go too much more into detail. But I will say this. The Sally house hasn't been anybody's personal residence since the 1990s, and in more recent times has been a popular
Dang.
tourist attraction, which kind of makes you think. Is the legend of the
Wow,
Sally
okay.
house real? Or do people just want to keep the story alive because there's a financial incentive? Regardless,
Wow.
the Sally house is regarded as one of the most iconic
I
haunted
low-key hate
locations
when like
in
the
United
government
States.
takes over
The year is
places like that
1885.
and sells
You
it.
and your
That's
wife
low-key
are
weird.
pioneers
I'm not
in
gonna
New
lie.
South Wales, Australia, and you have just finished building a
Australia, okay.
double-story late Victorian-style manor on the top of
Wow.
a hill overlooking your local town. This
Okay.
was you and your wife's dream homestead,
Wow.
and you built it with your very own hands. The construction was a labor of love, and now you could enjoy this manor for the rest of your life. This manor became known as the
Wow.
Monte Cristo homestead, and you and your wife enjoyed it up until your deaths. After you and your wife were long gone and your family had no longer lived in the
Wow,
residence, the
okay.
house essentially was left abandoned. There were caretakers, but unfortunately,
Okay.
the Monte Cristo homestead fell into disrepair. That was
my.
until it was purchased by another couple, Reg and Olive Ryan, and they were dedicated
What
to
in
building
the
this beautiful
world?
manor back to
Okay.
its former glory, and that's exactly what they did. They took it from
Wow,
a
okay.
derelict, abandoned home to something that was actually habitable. And once again, the homestead
Yeah.
was a home again. And it wasn't long after Reg and Olive moved in that things began to get weird.
Yep.
One late night,
Never buy houses from dead people. Like, what? That's the stupidest thing ever. Why would you do that? Just asking to die at that point, man.
only a few days after the Ryans had officially moved in, they were heading home after an event,
yep.
when they noticed that as they approached their house, they could see bright lights beaming from inside the house, illuminating all of the
Dang.
windows. This caught Reg and Olive's attention, and they were both speechless at what they were looking at. Reg knew that the electricity wasn't even fully finished in the house yet, and for the places that did have electricity, he knew he left
Wow.
no lights on and no lamps burning. Olive was just in sheer terror, and the couple stopped halfway up
Yep.
their driveway in pure awe of what they
Wow.
were looking at. Their home illuminated in the middle of the night for no reason at all. Terrified, the couple approached the house, and the closer they got, the dimmer the lights got.
Wow.
And by the time they actually reached their new home, the house wasn't illuminated at all, and it was as dark
Wow.
as it should have been. The couple theorized that maybe they were just seeing the reflections
Hallucination.
of the headlight of their vehicle, but deep down they knew
Probably
that
just an
wasn't what they saw
hallucination.
at all. And this was only the beginning of the strange encounters that were going to take place over the next few years.
Wow,
Following
man.
this event, when the family
Years.
decided to bring their family
Wow.
cat to their new home, instantly the cat was uncomfortable,
Oh,
which is common.
yeah.
This cat's in a new environment and was just in a car ride, something it didn't enjoy. But as soon as your wife put the cat
Oh,
on the
yeah.
floor, it arched its back and moaned in fear as if it
Yep.
was face to face with
Wow.
another cat. There was nothing there. The cat hissed and screamed and immediately ran out of the house. You, your wife, and your 3 daughters
Wow,
looked for the
man.
cat and never found your cat again. Following that
Aw.
event, there was numerous occasions where your
Wow,
daughters
man.
claimed that they could see a man's face out the window, which was impossible considering that All of your daughters had bedrooms on the second floor, and there was never any unknown men near or around the property. The family
How do you
frequently
know? You
encountered
didn't have
disembodied
cameras?
voices and footsteps and noises, doors opening and drawers closing, and there was truly no explanation for any of it. After years of alleged strange and ghostly encounters, the homestead was converted into a museum where it showcased antiques, local treasures, and it became a tourist attraction with a gift shop and became known as Australia's most haunted house. Since then, it was featured in numerous TV shows in the 70s, 90s, and early 2000s and 2010s.
That's crazy.
But very recently, in January of 2025, the homestead was actually closed to the public as Olive Ryan passed away.
R.I.P. man.
Likely one of the most famous
We're back,
haunted
y'all.
houses in all of Australia. And whether or not the paranormal experiences actually happened to Reg and Olive, or if they just made up stories to have a way to make money off of the house they just restored, I'll let you decide. The year is 1907, and the Dutch have just finished building a beautiful office building for their railway developments in Indonesia. Why the Dutch had a rail company and headquarters in Indonesia is a different conversation. But regardless, this building existed, and it looks really cool, and operated until 1942. That's because the Japanese invaded Indonesia, and they wanted everything, including this beautiful office building. You might be asking yourself, did the Japanese just use it as their office building? Now it's their headquarters in Indonesia?
That's crazy,
And the answer is no,
man.
because once they had total control of this building, they turned an entire wing of the building into a dungeon, specifically for torture and executions, something that wasn't uncommon for the Japanese in World War II. From 1942 until 1945, the building was under Japanese control, until Dutch forces tried to overtake the building from the Japanese. And in October of 1945, a battle took place within the building from Dutch troops who entered through a tunnel underground. Although the Dutch weren't only fighting the Japanese, they were also fighting the Indonesians. And the battle lasted 3 days, and the Dutch eventually retreated. Once World War II ended, the Indonesian army took control of the complex, and it was restored and given back to the Indonesian Railway Company, not the Dutch Railway Company. And in 1992, it was officially considered cultural property of Indonesia. From 1992 until 2009, this building was essentially left to rot, and over this time, it was vandalized, and nature had begun to take it back, with mold growing, parts of the building collapsing and falling apart, and locals beginning to have interesting stories regarding this building. This building, with quite the history, is known as Lawang Sewu, and it is considered one of the most haunted locations in all of Indonesia. Lawang Sewu is very interesting, and its history alone is something to be researched and talked about. During the time that this building was left in disarray, many local teenagers would make it a challenge to touch the building, or go near the building, or go inside the building, or even in extreme cases, stay overnight in the building. This massive building with such a dark and long history became a bit of an icon for all the wrong reasons, and everyone essentially considered it to be a evil, haunted building with dark energy and dark spirits associated with it, which kind of makes sense. Like, just imagine how dark the energy is being in a building, knowing the history. The unspeakable things that happened in this building, I could only imagine left some sort of energetic residue. Regardless, this building became very popular with thrill seekers in Indonesia. And it was over this near 20-year stretch when this building was falling apart that people had many strange encounters within the walls. Hearing voices, hearing footsteps, seeing apparitions, being scratched, being touched. All of these took place within the walls. The Indonesian government actually had plans of restoring this building, but were hesitant to do so because they feared that nobody would use or interact with the building because of the fear associated with it being haunted. But against their better judgment, they continued with the restoration project. And from 2009 to 2011, the building was restored. And in 2013, the building was officially open for tours. And currently, it's a massive hit for tourism in the region of Java, Indonesia, and sees over 1,000 visitors every single day. Now, here's the thing that's kind of interesting about this building. The government has official plans to, quote, eliminate the spooky image in order to attract more visitors, which I think is interesting because that's kind of the opposite of what most ghost house owners want, right? Like, they want to not only maintain, but amplify the spooky image in order to bring in people. But I guess the difference is they are wanting to make this a historical landmark, but they are fearing that this image could scare people away, as especially in this region of the world, people are extremely superstitious when it comes to spirits. And there are plenty of locals that avoid this building entirely, as they fear that going near or around this building could lead a spirit to follow you to your home and essentially bring you bad luck and negative energy. So Lawang Sewu over the last 120 years has had a very long and interesting and unfortunate history, including colonization, war, torture, executions, and other unspeakable things, I'm sure. But As the government allowed this building to sit and rot, the locals decided to have some fun and found a little bit more than fun. And today, the government has restored this building to make it a historical landmark and are doing their best to make sure that nobody talks about the whole ghost part of this building, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, they're going to track you down, my guy,
entries
talking
in this
about
list. Before we get to the last entry on this list, I just wanted to make a quick point. Originally, this video was supposed to have 10 entries, not 5. But because it takes so long to animate the stories associated with each of these sections, I decided to just essentially cut it in half. I didn't want to sacrifice the storytelling or the information for the sake of having more entries on the list. I say this because there is a ton of other crazy, obscure haunted locations that I want to talk about.
Content,
so consider this video a part 1, and if you guys want that second part, leave a like or leave a comment, and I will post another video about the craziest and most obscure haunted locations from around the world. Now, back to the final entry of this list.
Go react
to
the
year
next one.
is 1776. You are a healthy adult man living in Venice, Italy. You have a beautiful wife and a newborn son, and unfortunately, you are experiencing the harsh wrath of the plague. It's killed numerous friends and family members of yours, but fortunately, you, your wife, and your son are safe. For now at least, because you have to work every single day to be able to afford to live. Your family depends on you, and you try to be as safe as possible. That is, until you catch the plague. At this point in time, the government had a protocol for anybody who had caught the plague. And your fate was to be sent to the island of Bwithdashifts, an island that at this point the Italian government was using solely as a quarantine station for those with the plague and other diseases. And that is where you went. You weren't able to say goodbye to your wife or son, as it would pose too much risk to them. And you felt confident that if you went to this island, you would quarantine and come back a healthy man and return to your family. But unfortunately, almost as soon as you were shipped to this island, you were never heard from again. Your son was able to grow up through the plague and survive it. As time went on, the plague began to go away. Things began to change. One of the bigger changes that happened was the Italian government was no longer using Bwithdashifts as a quarantine station, but as a remote mental institution. And unfortunately, your son,
that would just make people
trauma
go
that he
insane.
experienced growing up in the plague, losing his father, and other hardships that he had in his life, found himself also on the island of Bwithdashifts. This time, not because of the plague, but because of a mental disorder that was at the time not understood. The island of Bwithdashifts at this point had claimed the lives of multiple generations in your family. But sadly, this wasn't unique to your family. Tens of thousands of people had perished on Bwithdashifts Island. It's because of that dark and death-filled history that Bwithdashifts Island is regarded as not only one of the most haunted locations in Italy, but one of the most haunted locations in the entire world. From the late 1300s until the late 1900s, this small island was inhabited by people and used for multiple different reasons. The two primary reasons, the quarantine station and the mental asylum. There was likely an unspeakable amount of atrocities that took place on this island, and it's for that reason that after it was abandoned, people gained quite the interest in visiting it. The mental hospital was the last official use of this island, but when that institution closed in 1968, not only the building went abandoned, but the entire island became abandoned, leaving the buildings, the belongings, and the history to marinate. But it didn't take long for history buffs and thrill seekers to check it out for themselves. And that's when the legend began to grow of how haunted Bwithdashifts Island really was. I've actually watched a video of somebody not doing a ghost hunt here, but just exploring the island. I believe it was Exploring with Josh I watched. And it's kind of unfortunate because although the history of this island is rather dark, the architecture is still beautiful. And the island itself is really unique. I could only imagine it would be a cool tourist attraction. Kind of like the Italian version of Alcatraz. You know how that had a really dark history but became a popular tourist attraction. Even though this entire island has been off limits from the day it closed to today, it's not stopped people from going. And it appears that almost everybody who has gone there has come back with a story, which has led to numerous different paranormal TV shows and even paranormal YouTubers to explore the island for themselves. There are no real famous notable claims of hauntings or specific apparitions on this island. There is just a general consensus among people who have been there that there is no doubt that this island is haunted, which they back up with the history of the building itself. This is definitely an example of a haunted location that I'd be more willing to take seriously simply because there's no financial incentive. This isn't something that somebody owns. Nobody's really gonna make money off of making a legend out of this. It is an abandoned building with a dark history that I'm sure the Italian government just wanted to kind of decay into nothingness. And if you're still hungry for some location-based content, check out the video on screen. It's a video about illegal places you can never go.
Make sure y'all like and subscribe. Peace out, y'all.